being here. And can I please invite you up onto the stage? Abderrahmane will be helped by Salome Fofana, who is an excellent translator, interpreter, and will help with the translation. But thank you so much. This particular discussion is going to be illustrated by some clips as we go along, but it's going to focus on one particular film that we think is quite significant to raise a whole range of questions around the work of artist filmmakers, and both of the filmmakers here today are known for their work in cinema and their art in cinema. Abderrahmane's film Bamako is one that was made in 2006. It's not the latest, obviously. There have been so many, but this particular one raises a number of issues that indicate how the work of filmmakers can resonate through the ages and can become significant as we move forward, and how at the time cinema was able to envisage what was going to be happening or how things were going to develop in the future. In this film, we will see where the actual film takes place, where it is shot, and that place is somewhere that raises a lot of questions for cinema. I think there was a moment that Scorsese, and that's in Bamako, it's in the center of Mali, and I think Scorsese, when he saw it, said he could not believe that this was, he wondered how you could make a fiction film like this. And I think through some of the clips, we will ask Abderrahmane to actually talk about that aspect of it. But it does take place in a courtyard, and you will see how the whole thing unfolds. I was lucky enough one day during the shoot to be there, to be in the courtyard, myself and Suzy Lando, because we were in Bamako at the time, and we went to the shoot, and so we're sitting over to the side. You won't see us. But it was definitely a very interesting and engaging place to see that film. What we will do is show the clips as we go, and I will ask questions to Abderrahmane, and John also will give his commentary on some of the questions. If we have time, we will also look at a couple of clips from John's work, but we have quite a lot to get through, so we'll do that. Okay, so we'll start with the first clip, which situates one of the key characters. We see her a lot within the film, but it's one that Abderrahmane wanted to start with because it sets one aspect of a question, of a situation that people might not expect to have discussed, to have presented in a discussion that is about how the West and the African continent are negotiating the existence of people of the continent and how their relationship works for survival. Remember, this was done in 2006, so it's quite a keen discussion that I think you will recognize. The first clip is the singer Isa Maiga, who's one of the residents of the courtyard, and she's getting ready to go for her evening. But it indicates something, and you will notice how that works when you see some of the other clips as well. So we'll have, please, clip 1. What we should do is go on to the next clip as well, because we'll be able to see more of the courtyard. But she is one of the characters. And then perhaps Abderrahmane or John, if you'd like to explain a bit more about the courtyard and these two clips, these characters. So please, can we go to clip 2 with the old man?
Monsieur Gancier, demandez à monsieur de se décoiffer. Dites-lui que ce n'est pas encore son tour, il aura l'occasion de parler, pour le moment qu'il se retire dans la salle.
Torba, ikuma Macedonia, makuma Dimapro, yani ikuma Cuxima, ikatisirisi yo.
Alors, comment il fait un chose de la ville de secours, la ville de secours, il m'a sorti pour tout.
Pour mes villes, je connais, il va faire un peu. Après, comment baisser? Il y a 6 ans, comment aller makuma Dima? Il y a 4 ans, il y a 6 ans.
Alors, on t'est pas chez Kouy.
Il y a compris.
D'ailleurs, on a coché, on a coupé. Parce que les Japon, ils n'ont pas mis tout ça. C'est qu'à quoi t'as tout fort. Pour qu'à l'homme, on va le couler. Et quand on a posé la tête,
Dites-lui de s'adresser à la
cour. Nikuma Madima, il va être ici pour Watimana, moi Bedima, au droit de l'ennemi de toi.
Nous t'es pas galement. On a très bien.
D'accord, merci.
Okay, sorry. Two very different characters in this courtyard. And Abderrahmane, I'd like you to talk about their role within the film, because they're quite important motives, both of them. And the old man, we're hoping that we will see him again later on in the film. But please, could you talk about these as two significant characters within the courtyard?
Donc je voudrais tout d'abord remercier l'audience
So first of all, I would like to thank everyone who's here
et tous ceux qui ont rendu cette conversation possible parce que elle a un caractère très important pour moi.
and thank you to everyone who made this conversation possible because it's really important to me.
Même si la projection de demain de Black Tea est importante, mais être ce soir avec un ami, un artiste comme John est quelque chose de très important pour moi.
So even if the screening of Black Tea tomorrow is also very important, being in the presence of John, my friend, is very important to me.
Voilà, donc John était un grand artiste, c'est quelqu'un qui a cette capacité d'exprimer des choses très très fortes par l'art, donc je trouve ça important que nous ayons une conversation.
Because John is a great artist, and so I feel like it's very important for us to have a conversation.
Moi j'ai commencé par Aïssa Maïga qui chante.
So I first wanted to show the clip of Aïssa Maïga, who's singing.
Parce qu'il y a deux choses dans ça. Il y a la beauté et la fragilité.
Because in these scenes, in this scene, there are two things: beauty and fragility.
Et la beauté et la fragilité, ce sont des choses qui ont un rôle très important dans la création, mais aussi dans la vie tout simplement.
Because both beauty and fragility have a great importance in creation, but also in life.
Et aussi, je voulais que le film commence par une parole de femme aussi. Ça, c'est important pour moi.
And also, I wanted the movie to begin with like a woman speaking.
Je ne dirais pas la femme africaine, parce que je dirais la femme tout simplement, parce qu'elles sont courageuses partout.
I wouldn't say in particular the African woman, I would just say women in general because they are very brave everywhere.
Et donc, pour moi, ça c'est clair, cette prise de parole par le chant de Aïssa Maïga.
So for me, it's very clear that it was important to have this woman speaking through the singing of Aïssa Maïga.
Et très rapidement, moi je voulais faire... quand je suis allé voir la chaîne Arte pour faire un pitch de Bamako, et je leur ai dit que je veux faire un procès contre la Banque mondiale et le FMI.
When I went to the Arte channel to present the pitch of the movie Bamako, I told them that I wanted to sue the World Bank
le FMI
and the IMF.
Voilà. Et je dis parce que ce procès est impossible et l'art peut créer ce procès.
Because this trial is impossible in reality, making a movie about it is a way to make this trial possible.
Et la deuxième chose que j'ai dit ce procès aura lieu dans la cour où j'ai grandi, la cour de mon père. Ça, c'était un élément très important pour moi, que ça se passe, une sorte de protection inconsciente peut-être.
And the second thing I told them is that this trial should happen in the courtyard where I was brought up, in the courtyard of my father. And yeah, it was for me a very important dimension because it gave this kind of like unconscious protection.
Et c'est vraiment quelque chose d'inconscient parce que je me suis dit, un film comme ça improvisé n'est pas évident. Et si j'échoue dans cette prise de parole, j'échouerai dans cette cour que je connais, où je suis tombé plusieurs fois, j'ai trébuché, enfant, etc. Donc, cela me donnait une force, en fait, en réalité.
Yeah. This protection was important because I thought that if I was failing with this movie, I was failing in the courtyard of my childhood, and so this gave me some kind of like protection and strength to make the movie.
Et donc après, on peut parler du dispositif.
Say anything about this?
A lot. So I would also like to thank you, June, for taking the trouble to do this with me and my very good friend. It's extraordinary for me because, and also quite moving, because we have known each other over 2 decades now, but we've never done this. And I've never had the chance to say formally to you why you are so important for many of us. So I hope with Bamako as a kind of point of departure, we can have that conversation that I should have had with you a long time ago. 3 things to say. One, that we are friends, but of course that means nothing at some profound level, because the reasons why we're friends is slightly more important. I mean, it seems to me that people who make images, make time-based work, make cinema, always need a kind of tribe who define the border for you, the border of the possible. And everybody has some, usually 10 to 15 people closest to your heart. And in that elite group, for me, is Abderrahmane Sissako. And the reasons are, will be unpacked, but one of them is that all the films, each one, from the beginning, always posits itself as a kind of proposal, aesthetic proposal. What if we make a film in which we literally put on trial, not as a kind of metaphor, but a metonym of a trial for the World Bank and the IMF, and people play almost like a kind of Greek tragedy, like a kind of Oresteia, play and perform the tragic itself. They're not trying to be, they are the tragedy itself. You know? Nobody in African cinema has even come up with that idea. And he does it all the time. Now, let's park that for a minute. I want to say 2 things about the things that we've just seen. So, in drama cinema, there's always a performance. There's always a song, a lyric of some kind. But each lyric always has a different revolutionary proposal. So, in this one, there's what I would call a logic of anticipation, which is built into the performance itself. And what do I mean by that? Most of the time when you see sequence in films, there's always some cut to something. And there's always a kind of bullshit reason why that's happening. It's like, oh, well, we don't really know what to do, so we'll do that. Or we need time to speed up the event, so we'll do that. In that performance, you see 2 scenes which appear to be cutaways, but they are in fact not cutaways at all. They become very central very soon in the performance. Both the baby lying there and the man sitting there are invoked and anticipated in that sequence and become something quite important. And again, you know, this is something that not many people do. The other thing which I think is important, sorry June, and I'll stop, that I think is important to note about that scene is that even though it feels, the second one feels different, it's actually something Dra does a lot, which is to take enclosures, to take spaces which feel as if they are confining spaces, a compound, a room, and overturn your expectations of them, because usually confinement is supposed to be restricting, it's supposed to be imprisoning, but actually in all your films, the interior is a space not just of intimacy but of freedom. People are always inside and they feel like they're trapped, but actually that's when they are really themselves, you know? So in your father's compound, Africa becomes a reality in a way that it can't be in the street. It needs the enclosure, it needs the compound to come alive. And that's just those 2 sequences. Every sequence we're going to show will have something like this in it. Sorry, Jim.
Thanks, John. And yes, it's true that this sort of depth of understanding of the form as well as the content is important with this film. We're going to skip clip 3. We'll go to clip 4, which will illustrate some of what John has just mentioned. So can we have clip 4, please? This is where one of the lawyers, one of the international lawyers, is speaking, and the woman, a very articulate woman, is challenging him in this. She mentions, well, anyway, you will see what she mentions, but you will see how excellent that she is, and the fact that she's having this conversation with the lawyer and is able to challenge him.
Le programme que vous avez proposé, c'est que l'on se ressaisisse. Vous avez une belle idée, bien générale, bien abstraite, et qui ne fait pas un programme. Et je voudrais, après cette observation préliminaire, prendre 2 exemples qui vont démontrer d'une manière éclatante que, au fond, vos idées... J'y vais. J'ai entendu, par exemple, Maître Tal donner des chiffres. Et vous avez approuvé ces chiffres. Quels chiffres? Excellente consoeur, vous avez dit tout à l'heure, on nous fait cadeau de 54 milliards, et en réalité, nous avons à rembourser 436 milliards. Savez-vous, madame, le programme pour le Mali et l'abandon de 1,42 milliard de francs CFA qui représente 60% de la dette. Avez-vous connaissance de cette information?
J'ai connaissance de cette supercherie qui a été décidée à Glen Eagles lors du sommet du G8 dans le cadre d'une prétendue annulation de la dette. Premièrement, nous considérons, compte tenu des taux d'intérêt pratiqués, que l'Afrique a fini de rembourser cette dette. Elle ne doit absolument rien à ces institutions. Deuxièmement, nous disons que la qualité désastreuse des politiques économiques dans lesquelles l'argent emprunté a été investi, qui n'a pas profité au peuple malien et africain, est plus un préjudice qui ne nécessitait même pas cette bonne action de la part du G8. Mais je vais surtout vous dire que ce 1,42 milliard, ce n'est pas de l'argent frais injecté dans l'économie malienne. Ce dont nous avons besoin aujourd'hui, c'est d'argent frais pour pouvoir créer des emplois et pour pouvoir investir. Mais quand nous l'avons dit, parce qu'on n'a pas parlé de la corruption, mais je pense qu'un bon usage des ressources qui sont les nôtres pourrait nous mettre à l'abri aujourd'hui de ce type de manipulation de l'opinion publique internationale qui consiste à dire qu'on a annulé alors que ce n'est qu'une fausse annulation. Ce que nous allons sauvegarder, c'est peut-être quelques milliards par an au titre du service de la dette que nous remboursons, c'est tout. Mais cette décision a plus contribué à soigner l'image du G8 qu'à servir l'Afrique.
Sorry, walking up and down so much, but that is one of the examples where the argument is quite articulate, and she is able to challenge them in a very clear way, and some of the organizations she mentions we know well, but it's important to see her having that role in this context, and we will see more as well when the others speak. But please, can you talk a bit about this exchange, because there are a number of them within the film. We can only show so many, but this particular one that introduces both the lawyer, the European lawyer speaking, and this response by a very articulate woman from Mali or Burkina Faso, actually.
Oui, je vais parler de donc cet avocat qui défend la Banque mondiale est un avocat qui en réalité c'est un communiste qui a défendu les combattants algériens. Donc, mais moi, je l'ai mis dans le rôle de défendre la Banque mondiale.
So this lawyer here, who's playing like a European lawyer defending the World Bank, was actually a lawyer who used to defend Algerian soldiers. So I decided to put him into that role.
C'est pour amener dans la fiction en réalité.
Yeah, it's to bring some fiction. He was defending like the community.
Oui. Et Aminata Abderrahmane Traoré, ancienne ministre malienne de la culture, est une personne que j'aime beaucoup. Et c'est elle aussi, un soir, j'étais avec elle.
And so this woman also used to be like she used to be like a former minister of culture in Mali. And so one day I was having dinner with her.
Et donc c'est elle qui m'a dit, mais normalement, ces institutions doivent se trouver devant une justice internationale.
Oh, and that's her who told me, like at this dinner, that these institutions should face a trial.
Et elle a dit, malheureusement, ce n'est pas possible.
But sadly, it's not possible.
Et c'est là où je lui ai dit, moi, je vais l'inventer. Voilà comment est partie l'histoire de ce film.
And that's when I told her, okay, I'm going to invent this, and that was the start of the idea of the movie.
Voilà, donc aussi, il était très important pour moi. Vous allez voir, c'est beaucoup de prises de parole.
So that's why it was important for me, and you'll see in the movie, it's a lot about like speeches.
Et quand je préparais le film, je suis allé voir un père à moi qui était à la retraite.
And so when I was preparing
le juge.
When I was preparing the movie, I went to see like an old mentor of mine.
Oui, voilà, un père comme un
like
père.
A father.
Ouais. Et il m'a dit tout de suite, ce film ne changera rien.
And he immediately told me, this movie won't change anything.
Mais ils sauront que nous savons.
But they will know that we do know.
Et ça, c'est très important pour moi.
And this is very important to me.
C'est-à-dire la conscience des peuples.
The awareness of people.
Il n'y a pas un peuple qui n'est pas conscient de ce qui lui arrive.
There is no people that is not aware of what's happening to them.
Voilà. Peut ne pas changer, mais la conscience, elle est là. Voilà. Donc,
maybe it won't change, but the awareness, the conscience is present.
I think also in these sort of discussions, watching the film, which is ostensibly fiction, but it's dramatized as well, it's difficult to understand the level at which it is the character speaking their own conscience and elements which are scripted in the film. And I think throughout the film there is this movement between the two. And maybe that's why, as I mentioned earlier, Scorsese saying it's watching it and understanding it as a fiction film. There are moments that it's moving between the two. And the fact that they get knitted together is part of the strength of the film, because there's a lot of truth in it and the characters aren't speaking their truth, but there's also ways in which it's knitted together to make it happen. And you did speak at one time about giving characters, putting people in situations and allowing them to develop their characters, and obviously that is happening to some extent in this film. So it's something that you do a lot, and I don't know if you want to say something about that, and then John will also come.
C'est un film qui a été conçu sur un dispositif très clair pour moi.
This movie was conceived with a very clear concept.
Tout se passera dans la cour.
Everything will happen within the courtyard.
Parfois on sort de la cour.
And sometimes we will go out of the courtyard.
Pour qu'il y ait du silence un peu.
To get some silence.
Parce qu'un film qui parle beaucoup, c'est pas très intéressant. Donc,
because a movie with people talking all the time is not very interesting.
Donc j'avais 4 caméras.
So I had 4 cameras.
3 fixes et une qui pouvait bouger.
So 3 of them were like static, didn't move, or fixed, and one of them could move around.
Voilà. L'idée, c'est de commencer à tourner le matin à 8h30 et cut à midi. Donc c'est non-stop.
So we used to start filming in the morning at 9:30.
8h30.
Yeah, at 8:30, and then we used to cut at noon.
Mais il n'y a pas de stop, il n'y a pas de coupé, il n'y a pas de... Voilà, donc
But there's no
tout se
break.
passe.
Yeah,
Ouais.
no break in between.
Et les 3 caméras, je les gère un peu comme à la télévision en fait. Je dis à telle caméra de se resserrer, etc.
And I used to handle the 3 cameras, kind of like in television. I used to tell them, oh, bring that one forward.
Donc ça, c'est le dispositif scénographique. Mais il y a un autre principe, ce sont des vrais avocats que j'ai choisis et des vrais juges aussi.
So this is the scenographic concept, but also the second thing is that in the way I chose the actors. So for example, I took real lawyers.
Oui. Et donc comme ça, je leur dis pas les paroles qu'ils doivent dire. Ils savent réagir dans des situations.
So that I don't have to tell them exactly what to say. They know how to react in those situations.
Donc ce qui veut dire que tous les textes, tous les dialogues, je regardais mon film alors que je suis en train de le faire. C'est ça qui était intéressant pour moi.
So for me, it meant that I was watching the movie happen while I was actually making it.
C'est comme si c'est pas moi qui réalise parce que j'apprends en le faisant. Donc ce dispositif a été quelque chose de...
As if I was not the movie maker. So that's why this.
Voilà. Toutes les phrases, je les entendais comme vous les entendez. Donc il y a pas... C'était...
I used to hear every sentence in the same way that you're hearing them.
J'ai donné aucun texte en fait.
I didn't give any script.
John, would you like to?
Do you want to say something? Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why this is taking the form that it's taking now is because June and I watched Bamako, and we were both completely surprised by its resonance in this moment. And so it seemed best to just do Bamako and try and see how much of our affinities and our interests could be forced into a dialogue around Bamako. So that, you know, in case you think what's going on, that's what's going on. Okay. And I want to just briefly touch on this question of the enclosure again, you know, because there is something very touching, very moving, very bold about the Pan-African ideal underneath that. The sense that somehow you can bring the world to our enclosure, to our crowd, to our compound, our space, because the space itself is quintessentially African. You know, it's how most people live. But you know, everything that's been said in the conversations suggests that that space is too limiting, too backward, too savage, too African to deal with the complexities of the questions. Yeah. And the fact that Dra felt that this should happen, the fact that you felt that this is something to force together, I think is remarkable. Because on the whole, most of the time when we use the enclosure is to say, oh, please excuse us. We're just going to our simple place, you know, to be simple. To go to our simple place to be complicated and complex is quite something. It's amazing. So I think it's worth saying that. The second thing is worth saying is that in a way, something Bamako does is, for me, central to all cinema. You know, there's always a kind of utopian dimension in the cinematic. You know, the sense that somehow, you know, because everything you're seeing, as Tarkovsky would say, everything you're seeing is already gone. It's already dead. So in a way, the image becomes a kind of repository, a memory, a trace of a time lived and now gone. But that time says to the camera, the image, the cinema. I am conceding to you my death because in advance of me, you will tell the future what I am, what I was. That there was a moment when a conversation was had in Bamako, in Abderrahmane Sissako's father's house, about the future and the perils of the continent. And fuck me, you look at it now, everything in it feels like it happened today.
There's a lot of resonance with what is happening in
you
the
know
world
what I mean?
today.
So the utopian logic of the piece isn't just the usual kind of cinematic cliche, oh yeah, the utopia, it's actually real. You are really seeing, an image say to you, then, one day I will be in your space, in your life. And when I am, I will say something really valuable to you. In this case, because what I'll be saying is what's around you. Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, I think it's worth saying that. No?
Definitely. And having said that, mm-hmm. I'll ask for clip 5, okay, because it does resonate very much with what is happening today. There is resonance in this short clip, and you will see why. I won't explain anything more, but can we please have clip 5, and John will take up his argument again, because it illustrates it, I think.
Sure.
Oui. Est-ce que Israël a l'ambassade de mourir?
Non.
Tu sais qu'il y en aurait un jour?
Oui. Comme c'est fait.
Le gardien, ce sera moi.
This was made in 2006, right? What is interesting about it is that it's something that you see the character who has the book and who gives it to the other one. There's an earlier scene in the film where he's lying in bed and you hear him repeating some of the phrases in it. I thought it was Chinese, actually, when I heard him repeating them, but he was teaching himself Hebrew. And when I see it in the film, and when you see it now, you think to yourself, what is the link? What was happening at that time that was so important that it has such historical resonance with the contemporary? Vous comprenez les questions? Or John? I don't know if you have
Moi, personnellement, je ne vois pas trop la résonance. Hein.
Personally, I don't really feel like there's much resonance.
Dans cette scène, vraiment, ce que je voulais dire par là, que chacun est au chômage, donc il cherche un boulot que personne ne trouvera que lui, en fait. Il apprend l'hébreu dans l'idée qu'il y aura une ambassade.
Because what I actually meant in this scene is that Shaga is unemployed, so he's looking for a job that he would be the only one able to get.
Voilà. C'est pourquoi il apprend le hébreu.
Yeah. Moi, je parlais de résonance avec ce qui se passe en ce moment.
Oui.
Anyway, maybe John.
But it perfectly illustrates what
Yeah.
I was trying to say
Yes.
as well. Because sometimes these things are totally unintended. You don't. You build it and it comes. And The man who speaks and says, "I'm going to be a guard at the Israeli gate," is the one you saw at the very beginning that I said would come back. And every time he comes back, suddenly the cutaway of him sitting there acquires a new meaning, acquires new resonance.
It's not the old man.
No.
It's one who's quiet.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But the other thing is, I love the way in which this sequence lays bare this question of anticipation and the prophetic, value of the image, because he says, one day, as I was saying, one day I'm going to do this, and the proposal itself is so impossible that the other man laughs. He said, "How can you be so prophetic? Don't be an idiot, man." Prophecy doesn't happen, but it does, and the film is testament to that. The film actually works in that prophetic vein, because of course, several parts of Africa now do have Israeli embassies, but I love the fact that it just, not so much the example of Israel, but just the invocation of a future in which, agency, African agency will be realized. And the other guy says, "No, don't be ridiculous. We're never going to be free. You're never going to get a job." But he does get a job. Well, at least sometimes you get a job,
But it's the fantasy of Israel, because the thing is, that's what he was trying to stress.
Yeah.
You're so crazy that you would think that, that would be the place that you would actually get, it would be somebody that would give you a job.
It's just that in embryo, that conversation crystallizes for me the importance of the film itself, because what the film proposes is encapsulated in that sequence. So it is, yes, of course, the person who said to you was right, and the film is not going to change anything. Maybe not, but the film will bring the past into the present. It will bring the future into the present for somebody one day, and that is a change. Okay, it's not a radical change, or you've got food to eat, blah blah blah. But sometimes that's all we can do, and sometimes that's important enough to talk about.
Definitely, and I think, apart from what's being said about this particular film, a lot of what's being said here today will resonate in other films by both of the directors that you will see. Of course, Waiting for Happiness, Harry Makino is showing tomorrow? Tonight. Showing here tonight. And Black Tea is the closing film of Film Africa that's showing at the BFI tomorrow. So some of these things you will see, you will recognize in terms of the way the present and the past, but also the real and the fictional are treated in the sort of storytelling by images, by film, that both Abderrahmane and John are actually involved in. And this is the role of artistry. We'll show clip 6 because it takes us back. It is another scene of the daily things that are happening around around the courtyard, but it also is a scene where over the event or events, which is in this case it'll be somebody getting ready for a wedding. There's also the actual articulation of the arguments that are going on inside, and the fact of how these things intersect, I think is quite interesting. So please, could we have clip 6? Thank you.
encore dans le viol de l'imaginaire, de la petite conscience qui me resterait et que je pourrais me faire de moi, on vient de me dire que mais, le nègre, justement, alors il est paresseux. Il ne peut pas, de façon autonome, se développer. Mais ce nègre que vous êtes en train de meurtrir dans sa chair, par des rouages économiques et financiers, a fait justement les fondements de votre économie. Et ce nègre a assuré votre développement.
It's a lot shorter than I anticipated. You have? Oh, okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Sonia. Sonia's been trying to get the clips together for us. And there is another clip, I think, that we will have after this one. But this was just a little section, again, of life happening with the backdrop of the discussion. And I don't know if there's anything you want to say in particular about this section, or whether we should move to the next one. The next one will be the last clip.
Bon, ce que je vais dire, c'est un peu pour détendre l'atmosphère. Hein. La mariée, c'est mon ex-femme.
So what I'm about to say just aims at like relaxing everyone. The bride is my ex-wife.
Et le marié, c'est mon petit frère.
And the groom is my little brother.
Et donc, voilà, il fallait créer des petites scènes comme ça. Ça me rappelle au moins ça, donc c'est bien.
So I wanted to create these short scenes just to remind me of that. That's all.
Okay. There are others that we can reference.
It's worth seeing Waiting for Happiness as well, because.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Waiting for Happiness.
Oh, it's tonight. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
I prefer Waiting for Happiness because we only know it in this country as Waiting for Happiness. The artificial eye, when they released it, is called Waiting for Happiness.
Beautiful film. If you haven't seen it, please see it tonight.
And when you do, you'll be struck by what I'm trying to say about the African enclosure and how important that is for that film. And if you get the chance to see Black Tea tomorrow, it would be worth it, because Dra does something kind of quite interesting with the enclosure. He literally moves it to another country. And you see how when something is formally thought through enough, it somehow escapes its particularity. It's able to escape its restrictions. Cultural restrictions, if you like. Because the same logic applied to Guangdong works just perfectly. Much more so, in fact. Quite radically. I noticed that there's only 2 outdoor scenes in the whole film. So it's worth seeing it because of that. What is the attraction for the inside for you? What attracts you to it?
C'est une question très difficile, hein, je pense.
It's a very hard question.
Et je pense que l'artiste explique difficilement certaines choses, vraiment.
And I think the artist struggles to explain some things, really.
Parce que l'intuition travaille beaucoup quand on crée, l'envie, voilà, les choses arrivent de cette façon.
Because the drive of intuition and desire is very strong.
Ouais. Mais dans le cas de Black Tea, C'est un film assez intimiste que vous verrez demain. L'intimité, effectivement, m'a permis de rapprocher deux personnes.
So Black Tea, as you will see it tomorrow, is about intimacy, and it was intimate enough so that I could bring closer two persons.
Voilà, dans un moment de cérémonie de thé, donc on voit les deux qui s'aiment, qui se rapprochent, qui essaient de se connaître.
In the scene of the tea ceremony, you can see them getting closer and getting to know each other.
Et dans la version du cinéma français, on les voit sur un lit tout de suite. Donc moi, c'est pas ça que je fais.
And in the version shown in like French cinemas, yeah, you can see them both like in a bed together in the first scenes, and that's not what I wanted.
Yes, je voulais créer quelque chose de différent.
I wanted to create something different.
Okay, bon, c'est bien. I think we will show, as we have, we're very glad that we have the last clip, and in this clip we see again the old man who was the first person to stand in front of the microphone. And what is very interesting about this clip, is very significant, is that it's not subtitled, but it's one of the most, well, for me, it's the most powerful scene in the film. So could we have, yeah. Maybe you can see the power of that scene without the translation, but maybe, well, I think Abderrahmane's spoken a bit before about how you can communicate when you leave it to the character to actually do and say what they want to do. But the fact, as the director, he chose not to subtitle it, to me was part of its power, because just focusing on the character and how even when he's moving back and forward in some of the, you can understand what his frustration is, and by the intonation what he's trying to say. And I think that's can be sometimes more powerful than actually introducing a dialogue.
Non, pour moi, c'est un moment, bien sûr, très très important du film.
For me, it's obviously a very important moment in the film.
C'est un cri, et donc c'est un cri.
It's a scream.
Et un cri n'a pas besoin d'être traduit.
And a scream doesn't need to be translated.
Voilà. Mais c'est le cri de tout un continent. Hein. C'est une révolte de tout un continent.
But it's the scream of a whole continent. It's a revolt of the whole continent.
Et il faut que vous le saisissiez comme ça, parce que il y a un monde qui a dominé une partie du monde dans la violence incroyable.
That's how you need to understand it, because there used to be a time where like a part of the world used to dominate another part of the world with like incredible violence.
Et ce continent a été meurtri vraiment par la violence.
And this continent was hurt deeply by violence.
Et parfois, on nous dit, oui, il faut passer à autre chose. C'est l'histoire, il faut passer à autre chose. Mais c'est une histoire très récente.
And sometimes we are being told that it's an old it's history, it's gone, it's done, and we should move on. But it's actually a very recent history.
Et la violence n'a jamais construit quoi que ce soit de positif.
And violence never built anything positive.
Et on ne peut pas grandir par la force de la violence. On peut créer de fausses victoires, en fait.
And violence doesn't make you grow, it only creates fake victories.
Et donc, l'Occident a gagné souvent, mais c'est des fausses victoires pour moi.
So the West has often won, but it was just, for me, fake victories.
Et il n'y a pas une prise de conscience que nous vivons dans le même monde, c'est un monde unique.
And they never got the consciousness that we are living in the same world.
Donc, on peut pas avancer en écrasant l'autre. Donc, c'est ça qui a été, et c'est ça qui a été fait.
So you can't grow by damaging a part of it.
Donc, j'ai parlé de violence, mais la grande violence, c'est la violence économique. C'est le contrôle par l'économie.
And the great violence is economic violence. It's the control through the economy.
Voilà. C'est les politiques d'ajustement structurel du FMI, de la Banque mondiale, qui ont quand même fait agenouiller tout un continent, l'Afrique, mais aussi l'Amérique du Sud.
It's the structural policies of both the IMF and the World Bank that damaged a great part of the world, including South America.
Parce que l'ajustement structurel disait un État ne doit pas s'occuper de la santé ni de l'éducation. Ce sont des domaines qu'on a privatisés en Afrique, qu'on a affaiblis, la santé et l'éducation.
Because these structural policies used to say that they shouldn't care about neither health nor education. So they weakened both health and education in Africa.
L'État ne doit pas investir dans la culture.
The state shouldn't invest in culture.
Donc c'est ce qu'on appelle on vous donne de l'argent, mais nous allons vous dire comment l'utiliser.
So we give you money, but we tell you exactly how you should use it.
Ce que moi j'ai fait dans ce film, je suis allé me renseigner dans les bibliothèques de la Banque mondiale. Donc c'est pas des choses que j'ai inventées. Ça existe dans les bibliothèques de la Banque mondiale, qui se trouvent à Paris d'ailleurs.
When I was making the movie, I actually went to the libraries of the World Bank. So I didn't invent this. I went to libraries that are located in Paris.
Voilà, donc moi je cherche pas à être un juge. Un artiste n'est pas un juge.
So I don't mean to be a judge. An artist is not a judge.
Mais on doit montrer les choses comme elles sont, ça c'est important.
But we need to show things the way they are.
Et ce contrôle continue. Il y a des pays aujourd'hui en Afrique qui se révoltent, qui changent. C'est une réalité aussi.
And this sustained control is a reality up to now.
Et le monde change, donc la Chine existe, d'autres pays existent. Il faut en tenir compte, c'est des réalités.
But now things are changing. Now China exists and has relationships with Africa, and so we need to take into account that these changes are happening.
Mais ceux qui ont fait une politique qui a appauvri le continent, ce sont ces mêmes gens qui vous disent faites attention à la Chine. C'est ça le problème.
But the same people who did the policies to weaken Africa are the same ones that are saying today, oh, be careful about China.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I will like to open to the floor, but John, please have a comment on...
15 minutes to go, so... really. Pedro Pimenta last week was here, and he said exactly the same thing as you just now. But he gave an example of...
Pedro Pimenta, the filmmaker from Mozambique. And he...
because in, I think he said the 90s, no? Keith, can you remember, was it the 90s where he was talking about when they were... The 90s? Just before the structural adjustment started, he was part of a group from Mozambique. They were traveling in all the revolutionary spaces, making images for somebody. I can't remember who he said. And at some point, the diktat came from on high to say, okay, we need to stop all this cultural nonsense because culture is not worth anything. Interestingly, 5 years ago, maybe more, 10 years ago, I was in Nigeria, and I attended an extraordinary meeting with the World Bank, where by then they had changed their mind. And they were like, okay, we want culture to be invested. We want to put money into African culture now, but we will only do it on the basis of IP. Yeah. So if you can show, please now work towards building your IP base, and then we will put money in. And,
so it has to be an economic investment.
Otherwise, they weren't going to do it. Otherwise, they weren't going to release the monies that they had clawed back for that purpose. No, I mean, I think, listen, there's something remarkable about that sequence. And every time I see it, I think everybody here feels it, felt it. You feel it. You feel, especially once you've seen the film, you've seen all of these masks, impassive, thoughtful, but essentially opaque, clouded in opacity. And then suddenly they are reverse engineered by the African voice. And then suddenly each face becomes an expression, a gesture, a feeling. But 30 minutes before, you're like, oh, okay, come on, Abderrahmane, show us something actual. So as a kind of African denouement, it is very, very, very unusual and very fucking moving because of that. And really, thank you. Every time I see it, I'm so moved by it.
And if you haven't seen the film, definitely, we could only show these few clips, but you need to see the whole film because it is really quite powerful. And there's even much more that will resonate with you. And of course, it is something that you can go on discussing, the role of the artist in even something like this. Many people will know the Western sequence, which is used in such an artistic way to talk about what is happening with people leaving the continent and trying to reach Europe because they have no other option here. I mean, the way it's presented in this film, artistically and in a very effective way. I hope you get a chance to see it. But we're going to stop here and give you the opportunity, please, to make comment or to ask questions of our panelists. So we hope that you've, right, oh, and this one went up first, I think. There, and then there's a woman behind.
Thank you for your excellent work. This has been wonderful. The most eye-opening thing for me was that there was, you said, no script. I'm blown away because I didn't know how you did it. If you could talk briefly about how you structured how you shot it if you didn't have a script. Like, yeah.
Je me suis beaucoup documenté d'abord, donc j'ai lu beaucoup de choses sur la Banque mondiale, sur l'ajustement structurel.
So first, I did a lot of documentation work. I went into the World Bank documentation.
Donc les livres, des études qui ont été faites par la Banque mondiale sur l'ajustement structurel, sur les conséquences.
So I read books, I also read studies about the consequences of structural adjustments.
Donc j'avais énormément, plus de 1000 pages que j'avais.
So I used to have more than 1,000 pages of documents.
Donc j'ai donné ça aux avocats.
And so I gave everything to the lawyers.
Voilà, tous les avocats pour qu'ils sachent de quoi on parle.
So that they know what we're talking about.
Après, le reste, c'est un dispositif.
And the rest is like a concept, like a setup?
Le concept, oui. Et j'ai écrit 2 pages sur le concept.
So I wrote 2 pages about the concept.
Voilà. La cour.
The courtyard.
L'extérieur de la cour.
Outside of the courtyard.
Et une scène qui vient de la télé, qui est le western, que je suis allé tourner ailleurs, voilà.
And one scene that comes from the TV, which is a western, and that I shot outside, like elsewhere.
Voilà, avec Danny Glover, qui a donné $300,000 pour le film.
Who actually gave $300K for the movie.
Et qui a pris son billet pour venir tourner. Voilà.
And he took his own plane ticket to come.
C'est un grand monsieur.
So he's a great person.
Et donc, oui, le cinéma, c'est une intention, c'est pas forcément l'écrit, je pense.
So I think cinema is all about intention and not necessarily about what's written down.
Voilà. Donc l'intention, c'est très important.
Intention is really crucial.
Thank you, thank you. There were 2 other hands up here. You and we'll take both questions before we come back, please.
Thank you so much. That was really fantastic. I was reminded of the writer and theorist, also, I believe, from Mali, Manthia Divara's notion that African cinema, many African filmmakers sort of use cinema as a third space in negotiating Western colonialism, histories of colonialism and identity. I was wondering if, as a filmmaker, that idea of a third space has any purchase on your filmmaking and imagination.
But John could answer that as well. I don't know, is it something that you could... Yeah. Okay, we'll take the second question as well. No.
Thanks.
We'll have to take both because we're running short of time, so it's best if they can answer. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Akomfrah and Mr. Sissako, for films. These films mean a lot to me. I grew up in a very poor country in South America, and once I left, if it wouldn't be for films like these acting as catalysts, I probably would have never been aware of socio-economic or structural racism issues that affect us today. So they mean a lot to me. And my question is, I wonder if there's any personal anecdotes of people who have seen your films and have awakened their awareness that mean a lot to you and that bring you motivation to go forward.
Je pense à Buenos Aires.
So I'm thinking about Buenos Aires.
Oui, ça a été la projection la plus importante pour moi.
It was the most important screening for me.
Et il y a une femme qui a posé une question.
There was this woman who asked a question.
Elle m'a demandé si j'ai pas eu peur de faire ce film.
She asked me, weren't you afraid of making that movie?
Et moi, j'ai pas eu peur. J'ai dit non, j'ai pas eu peur.
So I said no, I wasn't afraid.
Mais j'avais une traductrice comme elle, hein, donc on me traduisait.
And I used to have a translator to say me.
Et elle a dit, vous n'aviez pas eu peur?
And the translator said, oh, you are not afraid?
J'ai dit non. Et elle a dit, vous avez des couilles.
I said no, and she said, oh, you're ballsy. You have balls.
Et tout le monde a ri, et la traductrice aussi. Et
so everyone laughed, and the translator as well.
Et j'ai demandé, mais qu'est-ce qu'elle a dit?
So I asked, oh, but what did she say?
Et elle a dit, je peux pas traduire.
And she said, oh, I can't translate this.
Donc ça a été un moment très important, et bien sûr, j'ai eu des moments très importants ailleurs aussi.
So this was an important moment, but of course I had others.
Peut-être pendant le tournage, quand on faisait des pauses, l'avocat, les trois avocats de la Banque mondiale étaient rejetés naturellement par les figurants. Les gens n'allaient pas les voir.
For example, during the shooting of the movie, the three lawyers on set during the breaks, they were naturally rejected by the other actors.
C'est comme si on était dans la réalité.
So it really felt like reality.
Do you want to take the other question, John?
Yes, of course. Mantia does talk about the third space, but the third space idea is something that goes all the way back to the emergence of Cuban cinema in the 50s with Solanas and those guys in Latin America talking about perfect cinema. Yes, Latin, but there was the Gatino Solanas, exactly. Yeah. But Mantia's deployment of it comes, I think, much more from Teshomi Gabriel's work, pioneering work in the 80s on third cinema. And I think it's also worth remembering somebody who's now gone, but was very, very important for many of us in the 80s. Figure called Paul Williman. In fact, Paul and Jim Pines, who organised our conference in third cinema, are now both gone, sadly.
Yes.
But the work that they did in the 80s on that notion of a third space, a space of imperfection where you don't have to listen to the rules anymore, and you can do what Scorsese was anguishing about to blur the distinction, for instance, between drama and documentary, as Abderrahmane does so perfectly. Was part of the move in the 80s.
Right. Thanks. We do have some more minutes, so we're going to take 2 more questions and see how we get on.
This was so moving, and thank you so much. It's been a privilege being here and listening to you as friends speak. I was reminded of the quote when you said a couple of things about the artist is not a judge, but equally this is about truth. And the concept, it was organic because of truth. Charles White's quote, the artist bears an incredible burden, which is to have a deep abiding concern for humanity. He has this burden whether he or she likes it or not, because he's dealing with ideas. My question is, how much more so is the truism of the plight of Africa? 80 years the World Bank has existed, 3 billion people now live in countries where more is spent on servicing debt, trade imbalance debt, than education and healthcare combined. Different artists have different aesthetics, but all are chroniclers of some form of their truth. How much more does that resonate for you personally as an African filmmaker, and also for the cohort of African filmmakers of your generation who are telling stories that are largely invisible?
Well, he's made a film that presents that, and he's chosen people who, in this situation on the African continent, are challenging that. That's the purpose of the film, and he's doing it in such a way that it's not wholly fictional. So it's people who are in that situation who are very articulate in presenting maybe these are just a few clips. I think when you see the whole film, you will see just in the ways in which that continues, and why this film was made and why it's important. Your question, I think, relates to exactly why the film was made.
C'est une question très importante, elle est fondamentale.
It's a fundamental and very important question.
Et la première partie, oui, je pense qu'un artiste n'est pas un juge.
So about the first part of what you said, yeah, I truly believe that an artist is not a judge.
Parce que c'est connaître, c'est avoir raison quand c'est la vérité. Donc je pense pas que c'est ça le plus important.
Because being a judge means knowing the truth, and I don't think that's the most important part.
Mais bien sûr, il y a la conscience contre l'injustice qui anime tout artiste.
But of course, any artist is really driven by the awareness of injustice.
Et cette injustice, l'injustice et l'injustice, qu'elle soit vis-à-vis de l'Afrique ou vis-à-vis de notre lieu, donc ça, c'est une réalité.
So injustice about Africa, but also injustice about anything else.
Et aujourd'hui, moi je vis en Afrique, je vis en Mauritanie, et je suis confronté à une grande frustration.
Today I do live in Africa, I live in Mauritania, and I'm really suffering from a lot of frustration.
Et, mais je suis un artiste, donc je suis optimiste, c'est ça aussi. L'artiste doit être optimiste, donc je suis animé d'optimisme.
But because I'm an artist, I'm also very optimistic, and I think an artist has to be optimistic.
Et cette frustration, c'est ceux qui nous dirigent en Afrique, qui sont terribles.
And the frustration is in particular about those who are in power in Africa.
Et qui sont au pouvoir, qui restent au pouvoir. Certains y sont pendant 40 ans.
Those in power, those that stay in power, some of them staying in power for about more than 40 years.
Et le pays est de plus en plus pauvre. Quand on prend le Cameroun, 40 ans de pouvoir de Paul Biya, c'est terrible. C'est terrible de voir ça. C'est terrible de vivre ça.
So, for example, Cameroon is one of those countries where the people in power have been there for more than 40 years, and the country is getting poorer and poorer, and it's really awful to see this.
On peut prendre le Congo. Le Congo-Brazza, c'est aussi presque 40 ans de pouvoir.
Congo-Brazzaville is another example.
On peut prendre beaucoup d'exemples. Le Gabon, c'était comme ça. Ce sont des pays qui sont soutenus et protégés par des démocraties. C'est ça qui est terrible. C'est-à-dire que ces 40 ans de pouvoir, ça profite à des démocraties, à des pays démocratiques. des pays démocratiques, entre guillemets, à des pays civilisés. C'est ça. Donc il y a quelque chose de terrible dans ça. Mais
Gabon is also one of the other examples, but the important thing to notice is that all these countries are both supported and protected by so-called democracies.
Mais les changements commencent. Le Sénégal, le peuple sénégalais a fait un choix extraordinaire, voilà, sur 2 jeunes de 40 ans.
So, but some changes are happening right now, and for example, Senegal made a very important decision for itself by choosing 2 40-year-old new people.
Voilà, qui se battent depuis 10 ans.
Who have been battling for 10 years.
Et qui ont été renvoyés des fonctions publiques parce qu'ils se battaient contre l'injustice, contre la corruption. Ils ont été écartés. Et le peuple a choisi ces 2-là.
Both of them had been laid off from public service because they were trying to fight against injustice, and the Senegalese people chose exactly those 2 people.
Donc c'est là où je dis les choses changent, parce que le monde aussi change, les partenariats changent aujourd'hui.
And that's what I mean when I say the world is changing right now, because even the partnerships are changing.
Et l'Europe se ferme, c'est une forteresse, mais les gens vont en Turquie faire des affaires, les gens vont en Chine faire des affaires, on va en Corée du Sud, c'est ça, le monde change, donc c'est une réalité.
Europe is putting up barriers, but people are going to Turkey, people are going to China to make business.
Oui, il y a vraiment quelque chose on peut être optimiste en disant que le monde change, et je ne suis pas à l'aise quand je critique trop l'Europe, mais je suis conscient de la responsabilité de l'Afrique. Quand je critique l'Europe, je ne suis pas à l'aise, parce que je peux aussi parler très longtemps de mon pays, du continent africain.
So I think this change gives reason to be optimistic, but also I don't really feel completely comfortable when I'm criticizing Europe like this, because I'm also very much aware of the responsibility of Africa, but I'm also aware of the responsibility of Europe.
Mais l'Europe, comme Aminata le dit dans le film, l'Europe, il s'est infligé 2 peurs.
But as Aminata is saying in the movie, Europe knows how to inflict 2 kinds of fear.
Non, l'Europe s'est infligée.
Imposed upon itself
2 peurs.
2 fears.
Le terrorisme et l'immigration.
Terrorism and immigration.
Voilà. Donc l'Europe vit sous cette tension.
And so Europe thrives or develops upon these 2 tensions.
Et la peur ne fait pas avancer.
And fear doesn't allow you to move forward.
Voilà. On va trouver des coupables, on va couper des têtes, on va rejeter des gens, on va créer des prétextes avec la peur qu'on impose au peuple.
Yeah. Because finding scapegoats and blaming them doesn't it just fosters more fear, but it doesn't drive you.
I mean, there are so many expressions of that coming through the medium of cinema at the moment. People have seen Dahomey and see what the younger generation are, how they are articulating this moment. So I think that there's a lot happening where the arts, or at least cinema, is actually taking this on as well. So whether it's to do with films like this that's much older, and the new films, they're actually also presenting some perspective on where we are now, and there's a lot to discuss. We could take one more question, I think. Do we have? If not, John.
Sorry, I'll just interrupt to wrap up. So we got Waiting for Happiness here at 6:10, so you feel free to join us, and Black Tea on the 7th of December if you miss tomorrow. And also, as you leave, can you just take the glass downstairs to the restaurant? That will be very helpful for the usher. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. John, yes, John, and then Abderrahmane, final.
Everything you said, the last person who spoke, was so important, and I think June is right to say that cinema at the moment, and I would fix that moment with Bamako as the beginnings of this, attempting to grapple with two ways of combating something. So there is obviously the reality of walking the maze of destitution, which is our condition. But with that comes two narratives. One is that we have always been like this, that this is like our universal, you know, our condition. And two, which is the language of the World Bank and the you know, structural adjustment thing, if only we would do the right thing, we would be able to overcome this destitution. And for me, the importance of Bamako is that it offers a kind of modest gesture, but the gesture itself is really important. It becomes a gesture of refusal. It's like a kind of refusnik manifesto. And the film formally, not just because of what it says, but the way in which it's made, offers this charismatic example of refusal. You know, so that when Scorsese watches it and he can't work out whether it's a fiction film or a documentary, that's deliberate. It's a deliberate gesture of refusal. And if this modest gesture can be reproduced ad infinitum across the continent, we will get somewhere. If everybody's like, no, we don't do that. It's not working. We do this. And Dry is right to say that there's seeds of this. I've just come from Doha. All kinds of African young men and women all over the place. People who would not be allowed to come here. Who couldn't get a visa if they paid to come here. They're not just dying in the seas here anymore. Some of them are like, you know what, we're not going to do that. We'll go somewhere else, where somebody needs us. It's not the answer, but just the refusal itself is infectious. People start to, you know, there's a film which if you get a chance to see, I think it's been shown tomorrow, you should see, Lumumba, the Johan's film,
Soundtrack to Coup d'etat.
Soundtrack for Coup d'etat. Okay, so there the gesture of refusal is to not accept the universality of a condition. So you see the anatomy of the collapse. You see it. You see the hope in Lumumba, and then you see the intrigue, the mischief, the white mischief, which brings him down.
In great detail.
Forensic detail.
In great detail.
Again, a modest gesture of refusal, but at least it offers a counter-narrative which suggests that we do not need to accept this epistemic violence, which is also forcing us to accept something which is temporary and made as permanent and historical. No, ahistorical, sorry. So there's room for some optimism, I agree.
Je voulais ajouter rapidement une chose qui me semble importante.
I just wanted to add something quickly.
Sur la production de Bamako.
About the production of Bamako.
Et c'est Arte qui a produit. Donc c'est la France qui produit 100% un film de révolte comme ça. Donc il y a ces valeurs là aussi qui existent de l'autre côté, qui ont permis que ce film se fasse.
Because it's Arte who was the producer of this movie, so it's actually France that financed 100%, like the totality of this movie. So it means that there are people on the other side who are actually supporting this gesture of like revolt that this movie is.
Well, this is, in fact, it was Abderrahmane that chose that this is the film that we were going to discuss today. And I was so glad because to me, I just think it's a very important film. A lot of his other work The artistry is very apparent. I love her and Makino, and I've shown them all from October right through. But there is something very special about this film that I think is sometimes missed, and I think we've begun to at least talk about some of it today. But I think it's worth seeing the whole film if you have a chance, if it is going to be shown at any time.
Next year.
Well, we won't have to wait until next year. We will, well, maybe we'll show it here, who knows? Maybe we'll be able to come back to Céline Lumière to show the whole film again. But really, thank you so much, everybody, and we will, and thank you to our panelists. It's a real pleasure to have Abderrahmane here, and with our own John Akomfrah as well. So well done, and hopefully there'll be more like this. And thank you, Céline Lumière, for making this possible, and Keith for programming it. So, thank you all.
I only came here last week, where there was like there was a panel about restitution in cinema, and it was reflecting the history of like the water.
Hello everyone, please remember that Black Tea is showing here tomorrow at the BFI.
Not here. Not here.
And the 7th of December it will be showing here at Cine Lumière.
But tomorrow,
and with the Royal African Society. 7th of September.
Yeah, no, I'm interested in connections between, I'm interested in the resistance and connections between
different cultures.
S'ils veulent bien.
Merci beaucoup. Merci vraiment. Merci beaucoup.
As well. So I'm going to stop the recording.
My son taking a picture. Is that okay? I wanted to say that thank you. Merci.